So we all had different ideas of the main purpose of this book, and for me, I thought that Gawande really tackles the discussion, or more so the lack of discussion, on end of life decisions. And I think his main purpose of this book is to inform people of a need for a better approach towards people facing end of life decisions. What about you? What do you think?
I kind of had a similar idea to you as what the overall idea behind this book was. I really thought that Gwande's main point was that during the end of life, something that we need to focus on is past just physical care, but also making sure that during treatment and medications, you're also considering the mental and social health of an individual, and to not focus on solely using medical treatment as the only method of care, but also focusing on kind of how to ensure that the quality of life is maintained throughout their dying process. What about you, Ethan?
So I had also fairly similar perspective as Kayla and Whitney. I thought that being mortal really dealt with the inherent struggle of human beings to deal with our own moral constraints, which includes like the degradation of our body and mind, and eventually death. I believe that he was talking about that the end of our lives shouldn't be about, like Kayla said, survival and safety. It should be about well-being and self-actualization. Throughout this book, we hear so many anecdotes about seniors being put into situations that they were not allowed to experience self-actualization, and in these moments, we find that these elders are the most unhappy towards the end of their lives. We also see that people who hold on to their responsibilities and activities, even when their bodies break down, are the happiest in their final stages, and I believe this relates like directly to actually Dr. Gawande's father in his final stages of life, where he held on to these activities and these people that he found the dearest. And Dr. Gawande actually states that each day he found moments worth living for, and that's the biggest takeaway from this book, in my opinion.
So, going off the idea of having a purpose to life, one of the anecdotes that we wanted to point out was the one about Bill Thomas, who changed the environment of a nursing home in New York for the better. He attacked what he called the three plagues of nursing home existence, which were boredom, loneliness, and helplessness. And what he did was bring in plants, animals such as birds, cats, and dogs into the nursing home, and found as a result all of the residents were much happier by doing so. And the main point to draw from this story was that doing something as simple as taking care of a plant or animal gives that person more of a reason to live, because a lot of the older adults were taking care and like feeding the plants and animals that were brought into the nursing home.
And this kind of ties into another anecdote Gawande uses to support the idea of the importance of having a fulfilling life towards the end of life. And he does this by actually introducing an anecdote that talks about the negative implications that can happen if you focus too much on medication and treatment rather than also on factors that might affect like the emotional and mental aspect of dying. And so in this anecdote about Sarah, she was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer when she was pregnant, and she was able to have her baby, but after she had the baby, she went through multiple rounds of chemotherapy in an attempt to extend her life. However, this chemotherapy was really causing her a lot of suffering and had a lot of negative side effects that were really causing her to be really weak and unable to maintain her quality of life. Gawande says, it's worth pausing to consider what had just happened. Step by step, Sarah ended up on her fourth round of chemotherapy, one with a minuscule likelihood of altering the course of her disease and a great likelihood of causing debilitating side effects. An opportunity to prepare her for the inevitable was forgone, and it all happened because of an assured normal circumstance, a patient in a family unready to confront the reality of her disease. And so again, this kind of just talks about what happens if we focus too much on treatment rather than being able to accept the fact that death is going to occur for all of us, and kind of making it comfortable as like the last part of the life should be focused, as Ethan said earlier, on well-being rather than just on extending life. Overall, we discussed how this book is really relevant to everybody, as everybody's going to at some point kind of come into contact or have to deal with death in their own way or terms. Whitney and I in particular kind of talked about how this book is really important for healthcare workers. Whitney, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, we were kind of saying that this book would be very beneficial to doctors. Earlier in the book, Gawande mentioned that doctors don't get the training they need to deal with old age, but rather how to cure illnesses. And I think that this book is really beneficial in that aspect.
So another huge demographic that I think this applies to is the demographic who has someone in their lives that is towards the end of their life, um, that is coming onto an age where physiological problems due to old age is inevitable. This book has a lot of wisdom on what exactly is going on in the minds of these people, and I think it would be very insightful for people who have someone like this in their lives. So this book obviously had a massive impact on how we think about the final stage of our life and aging and dying. For one, I look at my parents and how I want them to be treated as they age. I now understand why people do not want to be put into nursing homes, and I never want to subject my parents to this life if they don't want it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think everyone experiences death eventually. Death is inevitable, and I think having this knowledge from this book is really helpful to anyone in the future.
And I know, like, for my own self, I think that this book was really going to impact me, especially in my future career, as I want to eventually become a physician's assistant. And I think that going into the healthcare field, it's really important to have had read this book in order to gain that perspective of end-of-life decisions, and it'll definitely impact me in how I go about treating patients in the future.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you!